Okay, yeah, do you mind resending it to her one more time?
Nope,
Thanks.
we're starting, by the way.
Okay, great.
Recording. So we should have people, yep, we have people coming on.
Great.
So thank you all for joining us today. We are going to give folks just another minute.
Recording in progress.
Apologize, I didn't think everybody doesn't need to hear the feedback from my phone, but it's still happening. We're going to give people another minute to get on. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining, everyone. We're excited to talk to you all.
All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started today. Today's webinar is about SB 21-273 for pretrial justice. We're going to be talking about ways that we can bring our neighbors home, including an overview of the bill. And I have to say, you're all extremely lucky today because this is Helen Griffith's last webinar with us, and she has been one of our great webinar producers and developers, and she's just been a great person to have at the ACLU of Colorado. She is leaving us in a week and one day. We are not counting or anything, and she's heading off to law school. So our loss is the world's gain. So I'm going to turn it over to Helen so she can get us started.
That was the nicest introduction ever. And I am so sad to be leaving. It's hard to put into words, but I'm excited to be sharing with you all some of the great work that we're doing and we'll continue doing next year. So I want to start with the agenda on our next slide. So first we'll be talking about our Bring Our Neighbors Home campaign, which is our big pretrial justice campaign. And part of that is fighting the over arrest and over incarceration of folks in Colorado. And then we'll be talking about two bills from this legislative session, SB 21-62 and SB 21-273. And we ask that you hold on to the end because that's when, once you really know everything about these bills and have been able to ask your questions, we'll ask you to take action and contact your representatives. And at any point in the chat, feel free to ask any questions you might have. You can write to all panelists or all panelists and attendees, and we'll be answering as we move along. So the first thing I would like to talk about on the next slide is our Bring Our Neighbors Home campaign. So that's the name of a campaign that we launched as part of a broad coalition for pretrial justice. And I just want to take a moment to talk about some of what these words actually mean. For example, we use jails and prisons pretty interchangeably, but they're actually very different. Prisons are run at the state level, and people in prison have been convicted and they're serving sentences for their crimes. Jails are run at the county level. So most of the jails in most counties in Colorado have a local jail. And 60% of the people in our jails are pretrial, which means they have not been convicted. So they're legally innocent. They've been accused of a crime, but they haven't yet, been in front of a judge in court to decide whether or not they're convicted. And so 60% are just waiting in jail for their day in court. And you might be wondering why that is or how that happens. So this system starts when a police officer decides to arrest a person. And so they accuse them of a crime, they're arresting them and bringing them into the jail. And then that person sits and waits in the jail until they see a judge. And the judge can decide to issue a personal recognizance bond, which just means that they're released on their own recognizance. So they'll come back on their own, on their own volition to their court date. Or the judge can set a cash or money bond. And in order to get out, you then have to pay that bond. So if you have money, you can pay the bond and wait with your family, go to your job, wait until your court date. If you do not have the money to pay, then you remain in jail pre-trial just because you can't pay that money until your day in court. So that's what we mean when we talk about pretrial justice. We mean justice for those group of people, those 60% of people in Colorado's jails who are waiting for their day in court, so they're pre-trial before they've had their trial and been found innocent or guilty. So these are our three big goals as part of our Bring Our Neighbors Home and Pretrial Justice campaign. The first is to dramatically increase the number of people who are free pretrial. So we think you should only be detained pretrial if A, you're a flight risk, so you might try to flee the country to avoid going to court. You might try to flee to not have your court date, or if you're a public safety risk. And that means that you would actually be a danger to other people if you were free pretrial. And so the second part of that is ending wealth-based detention. Because right now, it is not whether or not you're a safety or flight risk that is the factor for whether or not you're in jail pretrial. It's not about if you're an actual safety risk, it's about whether or not you can afford to get out. And this is a way of incarcerating people solely for their poverty if they can't make that bond and be released. And the final goal is to fight racism at every part of this process. And it will not be shocking for many of you, I'm sure, to know that at every stage, from arrest to sentencing, there are massive racial disparities. In Colorado, Black people are arrested at a rate 8 times higher than white people for lower level offenses. And not only are Black and Latinx people disproportionately policed and arrested compared to white people, but they are more likely to have money bonds set, more likely to face higher bond amounts, and as a result, more likely to be detained pre-trial. And here is a really disturbing fact that has long stayed with me. Even though Black people make up less than 5% of Colorado's population, they account for more than 15% of people in Colorado's jails. And so the real problems at the heart of our criminal legal system are even more heightened when you look at the pretrial context. And so the goal of the Bring Our Neighbors Home is exactly that, to bring home folks who are in jail pretrial so they can wait for their day in court with their families and their communities where they belong. And so we're trying to solve the two big problems we see, which are over arrest and over incarceration. So I want to talk about over arrest first. So that's on our next slide. So over half of arrests in Colorado are for low-level nonviolent offenses, which is crazy when you think about that. That means so much police time and energy and court time and energy is focused on arresting people for these low-level offenses. And even though these people don't need to be arrested for these low-level offenses, each time there is that interaction between police and a community member, there is the potential for violence. And over half of police killings in Colorado have involved incidents that began in response to an alleged low-level offense. Many of them, there wasn't even an offense taking place, or someone was in a mental health crisis. And it is truly disturbing that Colorado is 6th in the nation for the overall rate of police killings and 5th for police killings of Black people. And I just want to take a moment to let the next two facts really sink in. Black people are killed by law enforcement at 4 times the rate of white people in our state. And Latinx people are killed by law enforcement at 2 times the rate. And so each time that police are arresting someone on an alleged lower level offense, there is potential for that person's life to be taken away. And to put a human face to this, I want to talk about Marvin Booker. He was arrested on a lower level drug charge. He was a peaceful street preacher, and he has a loving family that misses him. And when he was incarcerated in the Denver jail, he paused and went back to the booking room to go get his shoes. And he was pinned down and he was held down in a chokehold for 6 minutes until he suffocated to death. And so the only way, the most effective way to stop these police killings, to stop these arrests, is to just have police give someone a summons telling them when to go to court instead of arresting them on these low-level charges. So this is one problem, the over arrest of folks. And our next problem is when they're then brought into a jail and they're over incarcerated. So that's our next slide. So Colorado's jail population has increased by 800%. And the huge driver of that is the number of people who are held pretrial, those legally innocent people just waiting for their day in court. And that time spent in jail, even if then you're found innocent later, can destroy people's lives. They risk losing their jobs, their housing, their medical care, and custody of their kids. And it also puts them at higher risk for future involvement with the criminal legal system, since folks who are held pretrial are more likely to be convicted and more likely to face an even steeper sentence. Tragically, jails have become our default response to most societal issues. People aren't in jail because they're a safety risk. They're in jail because they're poor, because they're struggling, because they have mental health or substance abuse issues. And as a result, suicide is a leading cause of death in our jails. And too many Coloradans have died by suicide in jail, and they're in jail solely because they can't afford money bond. And I want to highlight Jared Thistle as one example. So even though the prosecutor asked the judge for a personal recognizance bond, which, as I said earlier, is just when you're released, the judge refused and set a $5,000 bond. Jared could not afford that, and while he detoxed in jail alone for 3 days, he died by suicide, leaving behind a young child and a devastated family. So decades of bad policy have led to our jails being full of people accused of low-level offenses, of drug offenses, of things where they pose no public safety risk. And so depopulating our jails, letting out people who are just incarcerated pre-trial, is the right thing to do, because for so long we've created this broken system where people are torn away from their families and held in jail. And this broken system hurts our most vulnerable communities the most. People in jail are 4 times more likely to have disabilities, and jails are poorly equipped to help people who are struggling with mental health issues or have disabilities. And even though people who are experiencing homelessness account for less than 1% of Colorado's population, they are 18% of Coloradans in jail. And so these dual problems of over-arresting and over-incarcerating our neighbors has led to a real crisis. And as a result, each year under the Bring Our Neighbors Home campaign, we're working to advance legislation to help do exactly that. Make sure our family members and friends and neighbors can wait for their court date at home where they belong. And so I'm going to hand this over to our public policy director, Denise Maez, who just came from the Capitol to help do this. And she'll be talking about one of our big bills, SB21-273. Thanks, Denise.
Thank you, Helen. That was great. I don't know. I'm going to just assume or take a guess that most of you were tuned into Senate Bill 62. It really was a pretty bold criminal justice reform bill that basically was going to end the use of arrests for all misdemeanors, municipal offenses, petty offenses, as well as for felonies 4, 5, and 6. And it also had a lot of work that it was doing on the bond issues as well. And so there were some exceptions on the arrest standards that primarily had to do with repeating your criminal behavior and if you were a risk to someone in the community. And those were the only exceptions to the arrest standards. And of course, police can always arrest if they have a warrant. And that was Senate Bill 62. I think what Senate Bill 62 taught us was that fear mongering can be really effective. What really led to the demise, frankly, of Senate Bill 62 was there were so many misrepresentations about the bill. And I think I can say this with a fair amount of certainty that a lot of the misrepresentation was deliberate, but it might be that a lot of the misrepresentations were not. I think once someone throws something out there like, oh my goodness, this bill means that sex offenders can't be arrested, or an individual who commits a major assault, you got to let them go, you can't arrest them. And there's going to be all of these criminals, mind you, anyone that's arrested still remains innocent in the eyes of the law. They are presumed innocent until proven guilty. But I think the narrative became that there would be spikes in crime and spikes in violent crime as a result of Senate Bill 62. And unfortunately, that narrative took hold rather than the narrative that we were pushing out, which really has a lot to do with what Helen has just presented. But at the end of the day, arresting people and arresting people and arresting people does not keep us safe. Our senior policy counsel says often, and it was repeated today on the Senate floor, that if jails would make our community safer, we would be the safest country in the world. But we're not. And we've been relying on jails and prisons a lot. So Senate Bill 62, at the end of the day, pure and simple, we didn't have the votes. You need 18 votes to pass on the Senate. We did not have 18 votes to pass Senate Bill 62. And so since the loudest and the loudest noise, the biggest noise, however you want to characterize it, was really about the felony provisions of the bill, we then turned to introducing a new bill. The sponsors are Senator Pete Lee out of Colorado Springs and Senator Dominic Moreno out of Commerce City, though they are the two co-prime sponsors on Senate Bill 273. We want to make clear that 273 is not a replacement bill. It really, really is different, and it is narrower. It is narrower, but I do not want anyone to think that this is a do nothing, feel good bill. Quite the opposite. There is a lot of harm reduction in this bill. So what this bill does is it basically says, it increases the use of summons in lieu of arrest for low-level, non-violent offenses. And I think we can go to the next slide. Is there a next slide that kind of goes through the elements of 273? I don't remember, and I apologize, but and I'll just go through. Oh, there you go. Okay, thanks. So basically, here it is. It says you got to have a summons and not arrest people for traffic offenses, petty offenses, municipal offenses, and non-violent misdemeanors. So anytime there is a victim, then you can arrest. So there's been a lot of, even today on the Senate floor, when they were talking about the passage of this bill out of the Senate, there were still the fear mongers. There were still those saying you may as well just not arrest anybody. Anybody who commits any crime is going to be free on the streets. And that, of course, is just categorically false. So these are the only offenses. So it no longer has felonies in the bill at all. For the arrest provisions, it's as written here: traffic offenses, petty, municipal offenses, and misdemeanors. It also limits the use of cash bond. And actually, let me just make one other point, because it really goes back to what Helen was talking about, is both Michael Marshall and Marvin Booker were in the category of these non-violent misdemeanors. And so really, at the end of the day, this bill can conceivably save lives. Limiting cash bond. And so here's another situation where, look, you arrest people, and the bill is saying, okay, if you're going to arrest someone, then you really cannot hold them on money bond unless there is a safety threat or a flight threat. So again, it's not grabbing and arresting a violent individual and then letting them go on a no money bond, because there's clearly risk exceptions to the bill. And that's also really, really important. The third thing it does, and this wasn't at all a part of Senate Bill 62, but it establishes a community response working group. And the simple idea here is to study and recommend safe and effective alternatives to law enforcement responses to low-level offenses. We have heard, and I know that you folks have also heard, probably a lot more conversation than in the recent past about whether or not you need police, someone with a gun, to show up to certain 911 calls. When somebody is experiencing when someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, if maybe the offense or attempted offense is related to a substance use issue, homelessness. There's a lot of things that we don't need police to be there, but maybe an alternative response team with psychologists or social workers, anger management folks, with skills like that, as opposed to people with an armed gun that are prepared to arrest you. And those interactions with police can sometimes escalate, and they just become worse. And that's not good for anyone. So I really think if we can develop more resources or more alternatives to law enforcement, the safer police and community will be. So that is where we are with Senate Bill 273. It passed out of the Senate this morning on a vote of 19-16. We did not pick up any Republicans. The Republican caucus was 100% opposed. And Senator Joanne Janal voted with the Republicans against this bill. So I hope, to the extent that you agree with the passage of Senate Bill 273 and you are a constituent of Senator Janal, that maybe you can let her know that you're really saddened or disappointed by her vote. The next move, of course, is now it goes over to the House. And I honestly cannot give anyone any sense of timing on that. It has to be next week. My guess is it'll be in House Judiciary potentially on Tuesday, because it looks like the legislature is taking the 3 days off over the Memorial Day weekend. And so they're in session tomorrow, and then I hear they won't pick up again until Tuesday. So that's all I've got for you. And who am I turning it over to? To you, Helen, or who's up next?
You.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
Thank you so much, Denise, for talking us through the bills. And now we're going to end PowerPoint. And before we jump into taking action, which we'll be asking you to contact your House representatives, because as Denise said, the bill's moving over to the House. We're just going to take some time to see if there's any questions about anything, related to SB 62. I know a lot of you fought hard for that bill, or SB 273. Again, half of arrests in Colorado are for low-level offenses, so this bill would have a huge impact. So feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I see one asking about recidivism and crime, and if that was part of the resistance to SB 62. There was a lot of fear mongering around crime, I would say, and people claiming and debating rises or changes in crime over the last year, and what role changes in jail population could have played in that, and really trying to point to different things as causing other things, even though there's no causation, and many things happened in the last year that might have impacted crime, like massive job loss and a global pandemic. And then you can, as for recidivism, people might reoffend on some of these lower level offenses, but it's not, it's false that keeping people in jail just because they can't pay, is what is keeping us safe or not. Because, for example, someone who could pay and be released, that's not that they're safer than someone else. They just have the money to bond out. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that, Denise.
I think that, no, I think that sums it up, Helen. I think that they were able to take the narrative of, spiking crime and only in certain cities and only certain type of crimes, and say it's only going to get worse with this bill. And of course, there was no evidence or support for that statement, but unfortunately, the more and more it was said, the more and more it was believed. But the more and more you said it, didn't make it true, but it made people think it to be true.
This next question I love so much. Denise, isn't this funny? Someone asked us, are there any other measures to decriminalize poverty in this bill? I can think of an Illinois reform that got rid of debt-based driver's license suspensions. So that is not in this bill, but the reason I smiled is because another bill that we're working on, HB 1314, is ending revoking people's driver's license just because they could not pay a traffic ticket or they failed to appear in court on a traffic violation. So this is a devastating practice that impacts over 100,000 Coloradans each year. They lose their license solely because of poverty. And again, losing your license drives you into more of a cycle of debt. So that bill it now is headed over to the Senate. It passed out of Senate Finance just last night. So thanks for that question. We're really excited about it. All right, I don't see any other questions. So I think it is time for us to move into taking action. So I see 35 of you now in the chat, and I really hope that you all will stay with us in order to contact your representatives, because it really matters. It has a huge impact. So I'm going to share my screen now to help talk through the first action we're going to take. So if you can click on the link in the chat, so it should be really easy. Just click right down there. You'll see a link in the chat, and it will take you to this page. And on this page, we're going to ask you to contact your House representative to pass SB 21-273. And it's really easy. It's already written for you, and it will automatically send to your House representative. So I'm just going to show you how easy this is. You're just going to put in, mine's autofilling, but you're going to put in your name and your email address. And then you're going to fill this out. You just have to put your first line of address, and then you're going to click send message, and that will automatically send to your House representative in support of this bill. And you can see how many other people have done this along with you. So this should only take a few minutes. So if you can click on that link and then send me a message in the chat when folks have done that. I hope to see 35. Yes, I did this. I'm so excited to be part of a democracy and emailing my legislators. Done. Great. Thank you, Catherine. That was very fast. Wow, this is a fast crowd. Yeah, it should be pretty easy. You can just put this in and it will just send this form email. And let me know if you have any questions about this. but great. Yeah. And if you know who your representative is, feel free to also send a thank you. All right. So as I'm waiting for more done to come in, the next step that we're going to do is we're going to write a personalized email. And I know that I'm asking you to send 2 emails, but they serve different purposes. These emails are helpful because they can be part of a big push. Legislators might say, oh, I got 100 emails about this bill today or something like that. But personalized emails are much more likely to be read and are more impactful because it doesn't look like it's coming from the ACLU. It looks like it's coming from you. And it isn't, a generic language that's already written here. It's your own personal reason for supporting the bill. And just so you guys know, when people wrote personal emails on SB 62, that's how we were able to figure out where legislators were. It has a huge impact to write personal messages that feel real. And, they really know this is from a constituent. All right, so a lot of folks are done. So I think we're going to move on over to writing this personal email. So the first thing that we're going to do in order to send an email is you need to know who your legislator is. And this is always a good time to find out. And just to clarify, it wouldn't be Bennett or DeGette or any of your senators or congresspeople in Washington, D.C. It is your Colorado senator and representative because this is a Colorado state bill. So I'm now dropping in a chat this link. It's really easy and it's a great way to find your legislator. If you don't know who your legislator is, this is a great way to find out. And since there's often a lot less engagement in state politics, these emails matter a lot more in some ways because they're just much more likely to be read. So I'm going to put in my zip code here. You can put in your full address if you want to be really accurate. So I'm just putting in my zip code and it's telling me who my legislators are. So my senator is Chris Hansen and my representative is Alec Garnett. And so I'm going to be writing to my representative because this bill has moved over to the House. So what you would do is open your Gmail, your Yahoo, your Hotmail, AOL. I think I listed all the email companies. So you're going to open a new email and you're going to copy paste your representative's email address in the address line. So just to make sure we're all moving along at the same speed, I don't want to be rushing people. I really appreciate the done or yes in the chat. If folks can let me know, something like I found my representative, I found my rep, that would be really helpful. So just message me when you found your representative, or for folks who already know their representative, that's great and very impressive. I did not necessarily know my representative before I started here. Should I not say that out loud? Found my rep. Yay, we're finding our representatives. That's so exciting. Great.
I would say, Helen, you should not have acknowledged that, but too late.
Too late. And this is recorded. It will forever be out there. I did not know who represented me before this job. I move a lot, okay? Great, people found their rep, that's great. Okay, so now that you have your representative and you have an email and you have your representative's email in that, I'm gonna send the very last link. I promise this is the last one. This is a lot of links. This is our very last link in handy old Google Docs. And you can click on this in order to see a sample email. So what the generic, email that we're going to personalize looks like is you're going to say pass SB 21-273 for, and you'll add, a personal reason, to end racial disparities, to champion pretrial justice, whatever it is. And then you're going to write, Dear Representative X, my name is your name, and I'm a constituent from your district. I'm writing to urge you to support SB 21-273. I ask you to support this bill because, and here is where you're going to write your personal message. Please vote yes on SB 21-273. Thank you. So to give an example of how you can turn this more into your own personal email and make it a little bit longer because we've got some time. I just found that my representative was Alec Garnett. So I'm going to write, Dear, I have his email in here, and Dear Representative Garnett. And the reason that I decided to write about was mental health. So I wrote, please pass SB 21-273 for mental health. And everything in italics is script. So you can see how I use some of the script and made it my own. So I wrote, "Dear Representative Garnett, my name is Helen Griffiths, and I'm a constituent from your district. I've lived in Denver for 3 years. I write to you as a parent and a proud member of the Denver community. I'm writing you to urge you to support SB 21-273. So I just added a sentence just to give him a sense that I really feel strongly about being part of this community. I ask you to support this bill because, and here's where I wrote my reason for caring about it. As someone who cares a lot about mental health, I'm concerned about how many people end up in jail because they were experiencing a mental health crisis. They need real help that they can't receive in jail. This bill would help make sure that people struggling with mental health aren't even further destabilized by being torn away from their families, jobs, and housing while in jail. Please vote yes on SB 21-273. And then I wrote my name and my zip code so he knows I'm a constituent. So I spent probably 10 minutes or maybe a little bit more on this. And really, it's pretty easy. Like, this is just saying where you live. This part, I just thought for a second about why I care so much about this, what really upsets me. And I was thinking of Jared Thistle and so many people who are in jail in part because of struggling with mental health issues. And I just don't think that jail is the solution. And that's what I wrote. So I'm now going to ask you all, you can go into this Google Doc, you can copy paste this email, put it in that Gmail or AOL tab that you opened and write to your representative. And in case you're having a hard time thinking of what exactly your reason for supporting this bill might be, it might be some of the facts we talked about, some of the racial disparities, the problems of over arrest. There are talking points down here. So you can copy paste some of these talking points. But again, the more personal, the better, but feel free to use any of those talking points. And now I'm going to ask folks if they can to share in the link in the chat. I'll answer any questions. Please. Let me make sure that I have the right settings on here. Yeah, anyone in the link should be able to view. So if that's not working, just try to reload it and then you should be able to get in. But while I'm looking in the comments and responding to anything in there, please make sure to drop in the chat if you can to help inspire other people on here what you might say. Why do you support this bill? So I wrote, I support this bill because of mental health. Feel free to add in the chat why you care. Do you care about, do you find it really disturbing that we tend to incarcerate people who are experiencing homelessness for things like trespassing, which is how people live? Is it because you're really concerned about the horrible, how Black people are so much more likely to be arrested and incarcerated on these minor charges? I would love to see. Perfect. Elaine. Yeah, I will resend the links. Elaine, that was a perfect example. If you have a really good reason, like you volunteer with Court Watch or maybe something from your job, if you're a therapist or if you have volunteered in jails before or whatever it is, it's great to make it more personal and use your experience like that. So I'm just going to send the links again. So right here is where you're going to find your sample email. So if you click on that link I just sent, that Google Doc link, it'll take you to the sample email. And what you're going to do is copy paste that email into your email tab in order to write to your legislator. And for folks who don't know their legislator, you're writing to your House representative. And if you can't find your House representative, I just sent the link in the chat. So you can just click on that tab, that Colorado Find My Legislator, which is great. It's very nerdy that is a page I have bookmarked, but feel free to bookmark it yourself and then you can help your friends find their legislator. And if you put in your zip code, you'll be able to find your legislator and your legislator's email, and that's how you'll be able to write to them. Now I'm going to see if there's any questions. And please feel free to add more reasons in here in the chat why you support this bill. I would love to hear what it is that made you care about over arrest, mass incarceration. Why are you here? Why is this something that you care about and you're spending an hour of your Thursday with us? We got a question about if there's been public support from any companies on either of these bills. So most of the folks who are endorsing these bills are coalition partners, and they tend to be nonprofits or other advocacy organizations. So I don't know that if we've necessarily even reached out to companies asking for their support. We tend to work more with nonprofits. And then I'm just going to send, if anyone joined late, here's the ACLU form. This takes, I just sent it. It takes 2 seconds to send the ACLU form. And it would be really helpful if the 30 or so folks still on here could really quickly send the ACLU form. You just have to put your name and your email address, and it auto sends, and then take the rest of the time. We have around 15 minutes. So that should be enough time for folks to write an email. And the example email that I had is short. Feel free to make it longer. Feel free to make it feel more personal, to use examples from your life. The more effort that you're able to put into this email, the more persuasive it will be for your legislator. So feel free to share any more questions or any reasons you support the bill in the chat. And I will stop talking for a moment because I know people are probably trying to think and write an email, and it's hard if someone's talking in the background. All right, thank you so much for people who are sharing in the chat. I am really sorry to hear some people are sharing about family members who have been incarcerated. And if you feel comfortable sharing that, that is very powerful. Just to talk about how this happens to constituents, this happens to Coloradans, and jails are not a safe place for people, especially during a pandemic. And yeah, if you feel comfortable sharing about your family member or friend, that is very powerful to say, that I care because this is really real to me and my family. And then we're getting a question about responding to some of the opposition that we've heard. And yes, I think that could be a great idea to help respond to some of the things. some of the things that opposition have said, a lot of it is to be honest, it's just fear mongering and talking about higher level offenses. So you could say something about how, this bill is really focused on lower level offenses. And you can also talk about how you can challenge the idea that jails make us safe. You can talk about how jails to incarcerate each person per night is $98. So we could be spending all that money on real public safety measures. It uses a police time to be arresting people on these low level offenses, and that police aren't the only voice for public safety. So those are some of the things that you can say. And I will send a link in the chat. If you're curious, you can see some of the other oppositional statements that we've been responding to. But I would say the big thing is just claiming that jails and police and arresting people is public safety. And if we stop arresting people, if we don't incarcerate people pre-trial, that makes us less safe. And you can say that that's not true, that we incarcerate more people than any other democracy in the world. And all it does is it hurts our communities. Yeah, and some of you might be emailing representatives who will not be supporting this bill. Maybe you just know that. It's still worth emailing them. It's still important for them to hear from constituents. And we don't want them to say, oh, I've only heard from my police chief. I haven't heard from my community that they support this bill. So you should still write your representative, even if they don't think that they'll vote the way that you would like them to. It's still important for them to hear from you. And who knows, maybe they read it, maybe they reconsider slightly, maybe they won't fight it as much. Who knows? Wow, people are writing really, really good examples. They're making my sample email look bad. Tess is asking about any specific reps that are on the fence and if it might be helpful to send to them. I'm gonna defer to Denise on that. I think right now we're asking folks just to email their representative because it's really powerful to be a constituent writing. But correct me if that's wrong.
No, I think that's right. But what I was going to put is maybe some that we're a little nervous about, at least for now. And if you're in their district, maybe verifying one way or the other. So don't assume that they're a no. They're just folks that we don't know for sure which way they're going.
Yeah, and you can also follow the ACLU of Colorado on Twitter or follow the coalition. I'll put that in the chat, but we often are updating on social media. If there are any representatives that we really need folks to contact, we'll normally ask people, oh, can you please, for example, contact Senator Janal that when we were in the Senate. So I can put that in the chat, but following us on social media is a good way to see. We often do calls to action on there, asking people to take action and contact other legislators that might be on the fence. So here's the coalition account on Twitter. And you can learn more about our pretrial justice bills by visiting this website. This is another good website to bookmark. Why not bookmark all of the nerdy sites? This site talks about all of our big 2020 bills. We have bills to get someone in front of a judge within 48 hours, this bill, and you can find some of what our responses to opposition, more about Marvin Booker and Michael Marshall, and stories of who've been hurt and what we're trying to do about it. And feel free to ask any other questions in the chat. And thank you everyone who's taking so much time to write these emails. Thank you for making them really personal, and even reading in the chat, I can tell people are putting a lot of thought into them. And Denise dropped some emails in the chat that might be good people if you already have an email written. And I will send a link in order to find their emails if you're curious.
Can you think of some other ones, Helen, that I know, I can't, I know, I kind of.
I love this crowd. I love you asking to send more emails. I thought it was too much to ask people to send these 2 emails, but people are asking.
You know what, I think, Tess, you might be right. I think what I sent it was to panelists, which wouldn't be to
Yes.
attendees. You're exactly right.
Okay, can you resend it, Denise?
Yeah.
So Denise will send some of the representatives and you can find their emails at that link I just sent, leg.colorado.gov/legislators, that has everybody's email addresses. So you can find Representative Duran's email there, Representative Roberts and Representative Valdez. And since you already have a personal email written, if you can send it pretty quickly to them, that would be really helpful. Bringing up other bills. I love all the questions about other bills. Yes, that is a great tip, Tess, about changing things. And that's why it's great to send personal emails. So it doesn't come through the ACLU form. It comes from a real person. I think it's much more compelling when it doesn't feel like an organization's asking you to do this, that you're just doing this. And changing the subject line is really impactful. That's why if you can see in the sample subject line, I wrote, pass SB 21-273 for, and then you write your own reason. So that's a great tip, that if it feels like it's a not generic email subject, like it's something that you actually wrote, it's much more likely that they'll open it and read it. That is a really good tip. I don't know how much they love our form emails. If you have any other tips on effectively contacting legislators, feel free to share. I also like always learning about how to help get through. And if any of you are on social media, tagging your legislators is also really effective. On Instagram or Twitter, we've seen a lot of legislators respond that way. Make sure to always be respectful. You're not trying to alienate people or get mad at legislators. They have really hard votes to make. So it's just sharing your personal reason for supporting this bill and asking them to also please support it. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. Thank you so much to everyone. I know a lot of you came to webinars on SB 62. Some of your names I recognize on every single webinar. So thank you so much to everyone who put in all this work. I know you're now experts on all these things. And I hope that you'll stick around for the next legislative session. We've got a few weeks left of this one, but Bring Our Neighbors Home is an ongoing campaign. And each year there will be bills under Bring Our Neighbors Home to reform our system and end the over arrest and over incarceration of our neighbors. So make sure to just keep an eye out and help us on not just SB 21-273, but on all the bills we'll be running next year. And thank you all so much. Feel free to drop any last questions or comments. We'll be sending an email with this recording and with links to all the sites. So if you didn't have time to fully finish your email, don't worry, you'll get an email with the link. And yeah, thank you so much again. Feel free to ask any final questions or any final comments on if you wrote to your legislator. Oh, the last note, I'm so glad I remembered this. If you hear back from your legislator, please make sure to send us to send me the email. So I just dropped my email in the chat. If you hear back from your legislator, thank you so much. Oh, this is so nice. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to keep volunteering here. I won't let them really get rid of me. But please make sure to forward if you hear from your legislator. You might not realize this, but you all are really how we know what's going on. So much of the time, it's so helpful to hear what legislators are writing back to you. So please make sure to forward that. And you all just have all of my gratitude for all that you are doing and for making these bills progress and for everything that you're doing. That's great. If your legislators always respond, it's really impressive. All right. I think we should give folks 3 minutes back of their evening. Thank you everyone again who joined, and I think we're gonna end it now. So you'll see an email with any of these links. Thanks again and have a great evening.